Hello friends, welcome to ADO.NET tutorial. Now we are starting a new subseries, table schema information. So in this subseries we will see how to get column information from the table. So the data column property exposes the schema information about a specific column, right? So the property here is data column. Below property can be examined to know the schema for a column. From data column, we can examine the below properties. We can get column name, its data type. Using allowDB null, we can say whether the column allows null or not. Then we can get information about the identity column, right? The identity column tells auto increment, seed, and step, right? So auto increment means the column will increment automatically, right? That's the feature of a SQL server. Seed means from where it needs to start. So for example, if I say seed 1 and step 1, the auto increment column will provide you 1, 2, 3 like that, right? Those kind of information you can retrieve using the auto increment seed as well as auto increment step. Then we can talk about the default value using the default value property. Also, we can state whether a specific column is unique or not using the unique property. We can iterate through the column collection of the data table, right, and make use of the above property. So when you go through the column collection, you will get the data column property, and from that data column you can retrieve the below properties, right? Columns collection that gives data column. From data column you can access all these properties. In this video we will retrieve the column properties of category tables of Northwind database. So from Northwind database we will pick the table category and we will try to retrieve its column information. So beside you are seeing the column information. So there are 4 columns in the categories table: category ID, category name, description, and picture. And you can see the data type: integer, nvarchar, ntext, as well as image. Also we can state whether the specific column allows null or not. Apart from this, you can retrieve other property values also. If you look at the category ID, it will be an auto increment column. We can get those information as well. So this example shows adapter gets only the column name and data type, right? Column name and data type. So by default, adapter will give you these two information. In the next coming videos, we will see how to get other information. Other information means, for example, DB null and default value, all those stuff. How to get, we will see in the next video. So here, if you see, we are forming a select string for category table, and we specify the connection is Northwind. After that, we are forming the SqlDataAdapter by passing the SQL string as well as connection string. Next, we create a data set and we fill the data set using the adapter. Then here we are forming the data table, and this data table will hold the column information. So dt cat schema, that's the name we are giving for our data table. After that, we are adding columns to it: column name, data type, and other columns you can see here. So there are 1, 2, 3, 6 columns we are adding. Next, using the for each loop, we are iterating through DS we already have, right? We know that the data set will hold categories table. So DS of tables of 0, which is nothing but categories table. From there we are retrieving the columns collection, right? And each column is of type data column, call info. So from this data column, right, So this data column is the class. In the previous slide we specified it as a property. It's a property derived from the data table. From column collection we are retrieving the data column, right? So we have column info. From this column info we can retrieve all the schema information. So since we already formed the data table, we are creating the new row here on each iteration, right? And the new row is called here row. We will populate this row, and towards the end of the iteration, the DT cat schema, that's our data table, right? Rows is the rows collection, and we are making call to the add method, and we are adding the row which we are forming here. And in this row, if you see, from call info we are populating the column name, data type, allow DB null, auto increment, default value, unique. All these property we are accessing it from this data column, and we are populating the row. We know that the data table row contains 6 information, right? And we are populating those information and adding the row in each iteration. Finally, we are giving this DT schema data table formed on the fly to the data grid view, right? Data grid view data source, and we are giving this schema. Finally, we are disposing the adapter. Now let's go to the demo. So here we are using the same table, and this time we will use column info. So CMD column info we need to handle now, and we already have the form for this, right? We have the data grid view. From the properties you can see DGV cat schema, that's the data grid view. Then we have a button called CMD show column info. Alright, first we will launch this dialog. So here is our launcher, right? We will make use of the launcher to launch our schema info dialog. Now we will handle the show column info button. So as you already saw, we create a select string, then we refer our northwind connection. Here we will import the system.data.sql client namespace. So here we formed the data adapter, and we are filling the data set using this data adapter. After that we are forming the new data table, and we add 6 columns to the data table using the columns collection, right? Data column collection, and we add 6 columns to it. Since we already filled the data set using the data adapter's fill method, we can iterate through the columns collection of the data table, right? We know that fill method will retrieve the content of this table and places that inside a data table, and the data table will be pushed inside the data set. So that's why here data set that contains only one table, and we are referring that using the index 0. Then we are accessing the columns collection. You can see that here data column collection, right? So each one is a data column. Each instance in this data column collection is a data column. So we call that as call info. Then since we already have the data table, right? So from DT category schema, we are asking to get a new row by calling the new row method, and we have the row. After that, in each column, see rows of 0 means here we are referring the first column name, rows of 1 is data type, rows of 2 is allow null, and likewise it will go on. And from this call info, right, we are referring the properties. So here we are selectively picking some information only, but there are a lot of information available for you through this call info, and we pick the important ones: column name, data type, allow DB null, auto increment, right, default value, unique, and finally we are adding the row which we formed here to our data table. This is the data table, right? After this iteration, the data table will be ready with all the column information, because here we are iterating to the column information, right? So all column information will be ready at the end of this loop. The information is available in the data table which we created. So we will show the result by making use of the data grid view, right? This is the data grid view, and we access the data source property and we give our data table which contains all the schema information formed on the fly using the for each loop here. That's all. Now let's go to the categories table in the Northwind database. Right, this is the category table. We will bring up the design view. From the design view, you can see that there are 4 columns, and we can see their data type, and the description and picture allows null value, right? And the category is a identity column, and you can see identity is yes, and it has increment 1 and seed 1. Now let's go ahead and run this. As already told, the adapter class, here we are making use of adapter, and using SqlDataAdapter we are pulling the data, right? So the adapter class by default provides a column name and its a data type. Now let's run this. We'll call the call info and click on the show column info. All right, here there is a problem with the index 0, 1, 2, 3. Here it should be 4 and it will be 5 here. Now we will build and run this once again. Rebuild all succeeded, and we will run this. So you can see the column names are retrieved. Column names are category ID, category name, description, picture. Right, category ID, category name, description, picture. So this is retrieved, and then we have data type also with us, right? Category ID is int32, category name and description is string, because they are varchar here, varchar and text here. The third one is image data type. That's why we see the data type here as a system.byte. And if you see, allow null is displaying true, which is wrong, because by default the data adapter will give you the column name and data type. Auto increment, if you see, that's also not giving the correct result, right? Unique, all are showing false. Now in the next video we will see how to pull these informations. That's all here in this video. Thank you for watching. Bye.